storm. He is Lord, Lord of all.
Welcome back to On Point from the Summerdale Church of Christ. We've been spending some time in Romans, and we're going through the study of the letters of Paul. We find ourselves now in Romans 4, 5, and 6. Now, in chapter 5 and 6, Paul's clearly making a transition, showing how the need to see the righteousness of God is also to see the depravity of man, and to know the goodness and the mercy of God is necessary for us to be able to be in a right relationship with the Lord. And in chapter 6, he tells us how to do this. Now, I find it interesting, a lot of our religious friends pass around tracts. There's one famous tract that says the Roman road to salvation. And I'm fascinated that when you read through that tract, it doesn't have a single reference to chapter 6, because chapter 6 speaks about baptism. The first few verses of this section, Romans 6, 1 through 6, right in there, talks about how we can die with Christ. We can be made alive in the Spirit, but that baptism is necessary for salvation. Now, I know that many of you listening probably are familiar with my preaching and familiar with my emphasis on salvation, and you've probably heard me talk about baptism before. But I want to take a moment, as we are now thinking about how we can be better servants of God. We have to start with a right relationship with God. And it's important that when we study the Bible, we look at the book of Acts and we see all these great stories of people that became Christians, became a part of the New Testament church. And in doing that, in the book of Acts, every single conversion story includes baptism. So it makes sense if Paul's talking about how to make things right or to be right with God, one must be baptized into Christ. And I love how he pictures it. It's like the gospel all in one event. We are buried, we die, and we're buried in that watery grave of baptism, just as Christ died and was put into the grave. And then we are raised up out of that water, just as Christ raised up out of the grave on the third day. And so we then, as we rise up, start to walk a new life in Christ Jesus. And it really puts everything in perspective, from Jesus' teachings all the way back to John chapter 3, when Nicodemus talked to him about the kingdom. And he said, you got to be born of water and spirit. And Peter, of course, preaching in Acts 2, tells them if they want to go to heaven, if they want to be saved, they have to be born of water and spirit. And so this is a consistent theme. So Paul's going to emphasize this. It's not the only time, but in most of his books, he has to emphasize what a wonderful blessing it is to be walking free from sin and without condemnation, because God is truly good. If you haven't been baptized in Christ Jesus, I pray that you'll reach out to me. I would hope and pray that if I live a far distance from you, we could find somebody close to you, because it's the most important decision you'll ever make to put on Christ in baptism. And we want to help you accomplish that. Go out and do good things today and put Christ first. Thanks for tuning in to On Point.
He is Lord.